Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. left a crowded night in Philadelphia and began a short drive home, but they never arrived. No crash, no witnesses, no trace. 2 people, 1 vehicle, and an entire story erased in less than an hour. Hello, welcome to Dark Mind Files, your ultimate destination for deep, disturbing, and real crime stories. Tonight's case is not just unsettling, it's almost impossible. A disappearance so clean, so complete, that even after years of investigation, it feels like reality itself failed to record what happened. If you like our work, please like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The morning of February 20th, 2005, felt ordinary in Mount Laurel, but for John Otterborough, it carried a quiet sense of purpose. He had planned to stop by his sister Danielle Imbo's house to help with a few small chores, something he had done many times before. The neighborhood looked calm, unchanged, with parked cars lining the street and no hint that anything was wrong. When he reached the front door, nothing seemed out of place. The house stood exactly as it always did, neat and still, as if waiting for the day to begin. At first, the silence didn't feel unusual. He pressed the doorbell and waited, expecting to hear footsteps from inside or the familiar movement of someone approaching the door. But nothing came. He knocked, then knocked again, each time a little louder, hoping for some sign that someone was home. The quiet inside the house remained unbroken, and that stillness began to feel heavier with every passing second. It wasn't just silence anymore. It felt deliberate, almost unnatural. He reached for his phone and called Danielle, expecting it to ring somewhere inside the house. Instead, the call went straight to voicemail. That small detail shifted everything. Danielle was not the kind of person to ignore calls, especially not when someone was expected to visit. A strange unease began to settle in, the kind that doesn't come from what is seen, but from what is missing. The house, the silence, the unanswered phone. It all felt wrong in a way that was difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. The night of February 19th, 2005, unfolded without any sign that it would become the final chapter in the lives of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. In Philadelphia, the atmosphere was lively but ordinary, the kind of evening that blends easily into memory. Surrounded by familiar faces, the two appeared relaxed, enjoying the comfort of routine and companionship. There was nothing unusual in their behavior, no visible tension, no indication that anything was out of place. To anyone watching, it was simply another night among friends. As the hours passed, the energy of the evening slowly settled. The conversations grew quieter, the crowd began to thin, and the night moved toward its natural end. Danielle and Richard prepared to leave just before midnight, stepping away from the noise and into the stillness outside. The transition from a crowded space to the quiet street felt normal, almost unnoticed, yet it marked the last confirmed moment they would ever be seen. Richard's black pickup truck waited nearby, an ordinary vehicle that would soon become one of the most mysterious missing pieces of the case. The plan was simple, a short drive back to Mount Laurel, a route they either knew or could easily follow. There were no delays expected, no risks considered. It was the kind of journey people make every day without a second thought. As they drove away, nothing suggested danger or interruption. The roads were familiar, the distance manageable, and the destination close. Yet somewhere along that routine path, something unseen began to unfold. That quiet drive, meant to last less than an hour, would instead become a blank space in time, an unanswered question that would linger far beyond that night. Somewhere along the dark stretch between Philadelphia and Mount Laurel, the ordinary began to slip into something unexplainable. The route was not dangerous or remote. It was a familiar drive, one traveled by countless people every night without incident. Streetlights marked the road at intervals, cars passed by in the distance, and everything about the journey should have been predictable. Yet, within that normal setting, something went wrong in a way that left no visible trace behind. Time moved forward, but for Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr., it seemed to stop entirely. There were no emergency calls placed, no sudden stops recorded, and no reports of anything unusual happening along the road. The absence of disruption was what made it so disturbing. In most cases, even a small incident leaves behind some kind of signal, skid marks, a witness, a passing mention. Here, there was nothing. It was as if the moment they left the city behind, they entered a space where events could occur without leaving evidence. Investigators would later struggle to define this stretch of time. Without data, without sightings, and without physical clues, the journey became a gap that could not be filled. Every possible explanation seemed incomplete, unable to account for the total disappearance of 2 people and a vehicle. The road itself offered no answers. It continued to carry traffic, unchanged and indifferent, as though nothing had ever happened. This unknown stretch became the heart of the mystery, often referred to as the vanishing point. It was not a location marked on any map, but a moment where certainty ended. Whatever occurred during that drive erased all connection between their last known movements and everything that followed, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. As the investigation moved forward, the case quickly took on a strange and unsettling shape. Authorities expected to find something, anything, that could explain what had happened to Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. Instead, they were met with an absence so complete that it felt almost unnatural. There was no crash site along the route, no abandoned vehicle hidden on a roadside, and no sign that the truck had broken down or been forced to stop. The roads between Philadelphia and Mount Laurel were checked and rechecked, yet each search led back to the same empty conclusion. Phone records offered no help. Danielle's phone stopped all activity after that night, as if it had simply been turned off and never used again. Richard's phone showed the same pattern. Investigators looked into their financial lives, expecting at least some movement, an attempted purchase, a withdrawal, anything that suggested they were still out there. But their bank accounts remained untouched, frozen in time from the moment they disappeared. Every digital trace ended abruptly, creating a sharp and unnatural cutoff that only deepened the mystery. What made the situation even more disturbing was the missing truck. A large vehicle cannot vanish easily, yet there were no reports of it being seen, no traffic camera footage capturing it, and no evidence that it had been abandoned. Search efforts extended beyond roads, reaching into nearby waterways and isolated areas, but nothing was recovered. With no physical evidence, no witnesses, and no timeline beyond their departure, the case became something investigators rarely encounter, a disappearance without a single starting point to follow. As days turned into weeks, investigators shifted their focus from the missing route to the lives of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr., searching for anything that might explain why they were targeted. Danielle's recent separation from her husband became one of the first areas of interest. Life transitions often carry hidden tensions, and investigators carefully examined the circumstances surrounding that change. They looked into her routines, her relationships, and any signs of conflict that might have gone unnoticed. At the same time, Richard's past was placed under equal scrutiny. His personal connections, work environment, and social circle were all examined in detail, with the hope that somewhere within those layers, a motive might emerge. The deeper the investigation went, the more complicated everything seemed. Each person connected to them was questioned, each timeline checked and rechecked, yet every path led to the same frustrating end. There were no clear threats, no recent incidents, and no strong evidence pointing toward anyone with a reason to harm them. Suspicion moved quietly from one possibility to another, but nothing held long enough to build a solid case. Even small details that initially appeared important faded under closer inspection, leaving behind only uncertainty. What made this stage of the investigation particularly unsettling was the lack of direction. In most cases, examining personal lives reveals something, a disagreement, a hidden issue, or a moment that explains everything. Here, it only created more questions. The closer investigators looked, the less they seemed to understand. It became increasingly clear that if someone was responsible, they had either hidden their intentions perfectly or left no connection behind. The truth, whatever it was, remained just out of reach, buried beneath layers of silence and missing pieces. As the investigation continued without progress, authorities were forced to consider a possibility that felt far more disturbing than a random incident. The disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. no longer looked accidental or spontaneous. Instead, it began to resemble something carefully designed. The complete absence of evidence suggested not just a crime, but a crime carried out with precision. Every usual indicator was missing. No witnesses, no digital trail, no physical remains, and not even a trace of the vehicle. It was as if every possible mistake had been eliminated before it could happen. Investigators started to explore the idea that whoever was responsible had planned everything in advance. The route between Philadelphia and Mount Laurel may have been studied, the timing carefully chosen, and the method executed in a way that left no room for error. This theory began to explain the silence that surrounded the case. A random act often leaves chaos behind, but this disappearance left nothing at all. That level of control pointed towards someone who understood exactly how investigations work and how to avoid detection. The missing truck became a central piece of this theory. Its disappearance suggested deliberate action, possibly hidden in a place where it could never be found or destroyed in a way that erased all evidence. Searches of nearby areas continued, but each attempt ended without results. The idea of a perfectly executed crime slowly took hold, not because there was proof, but because no other explanation could account for such a complete and lasting absence. As the years passed, the search for Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. slowly transformed from an active investigation into a quiet, persistent effort that refused to end. Early urgency gave way to long-term determination, with investigators revisiting the same locations again and again, hoping that time might reveal what had once been hidden. Areas near the route between Philadelphia and Mount Laurel were searched repeatedly, including nearby rivers, lakes, and isolated stretches of land. Each operation carried the same fragile hope that something, no matter how small, would finally break the silence. But every search ended the same way, with nothing recovered and no new answers. For the families, time did not bring closure. Instead, it deepened the uncertainty. Without evidence, there was no clear way to grieve, no confirmation of what had happened, and no moment that marked an end. Days turned into anniversaries, and anniversaries into years, each one serving as a reminder that the mystery remained unsolved. The absence of answers became its own kind of weight, one that never lifted and never faded. Investigators continued to revisit the case, reviewing old files with fresh perspectives, hoping that a missed detail might finally come into focus. Tips occasionally surfaced, but none led to anything concrete. The world outside moved forward, but this case remained frozen, untouched by time. It stood as a quiet reminder that some disappearances do not fade away. They linger, unresolved, waiting for something that may never come. Decades have passed, yet the disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. continues to exist in a space where answers should be, but are not. The case has become more than an investigation. It has turned into a symbol of how completely people can vanish without leaving anything behind. Over time, theories have come and gone, each one attempting to explain what logic cannot. Some believe it was a carefully planned act carried out with precision, while others think the truth may be hidden somewhere that has simply never been discovered. Yet none of these ideas have ever been proven, and none have brought investigators any closer to a conclusion. The road between Philadelphia and Mount Laurel remains unchanged, carrying thousands of vehicles every day. To those who travel it, it is just another ordinary route, predictable and safe. But beneath that normality lies a question that has never been answered. Somewhere along that stretch, something happened that erased 2 lives completely, without leaving behind a single piece of evidence. The simplicity of the journey only makes the mystery more unsettling, as it proves that even the most routine moments can hide something unexplainable. What remains now is not just the search for evidence, but the search for understanding. The case continues to be revisited, re-examined, and remembered, not because new clues have emerged, but because the absence of answers refuses to be accepted. It stands as a reminder that some mysteries do not end. They endure, quietly, in the background, waiting for a truth that may never come to light. Some mysteries are solved with time. Others slowly disappear into history. But cases like this remain, silent, unresolved, and deeply unsettling. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel for more gripping videos.